like 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island was the Class 5 accident. 90% of the core disintegrated, but the vessel held the radioactive material.
The vessel intended to do that by design.
That's right. In fact, the rods, which are very clean and vertical, looks like a box. At 3 Mile Island, when they opened up the reactor to photograph the state of the core, they found that it looked like a bowl of granola, totally fragmented and disintegrated.
But nonetheless contained.
But contained. Now, we think that this accident is Class 6, in the sense that it's contained but seeping out.
Not explosively, but just through
steam explosions and hydrogen gas explosions. Zirconium interacts with water to create hydrogen gas. You light a cigarette, you light a switch, and boom, you have hydrogen gas explosion. And we had 3 of them in Japan.
Many people thought those explosions were radioactive.
It was a chemical explosion, but it blew the roof right off the containment structure. And at Chernobyl, we had a Class 7 accident, an accident that ruptured not just the core, not just the vessel, but the building itself, and shot about 25% of the fission products right into the air, into people's backyard.
And all I'm saying is that Chernobyl, it was unprovoked by nature.
Right. And Chernobyl, it was human error. People disengaged the SCRAM safety mechanism.
And meanwhile, in Japan, that plant's been around since the early 70s, right?
That's right. It's a very old 1971 design, the Mark I General Electric boiling water reactor.
So why doesn't the reactor just cool down all by itself? What is driving the heat source that puts it at risk of melting?
A nuclear meltdown is forever, in the sense that you have all this nuclear waste. Once you shut off the chain reaction, power is reduced by 90%. But it's that last 10% of power that lasts for tens of thousands of years, and that causes the meltdown. It's called decay heat. Decay heat very slowly goes away. But that decay heat, the 10% of the original power, is enough to melt the containment, is enough to blow the entire reactor apart, and we saw that at Chernobyl.
So this is the heat that it would generate on its own.
Right. People say, well, why didn't they simply hit the off switch, right? Why didn't they simply turn it off? You cannot turn off Mother Nature. You cannot turn off nuclear fission. So once you scram the rods, that is, you stop the chain reaction, decay heat keeps on going for an extended period of time. At Chernobyl, do you know that it's still hot at Chernobyl? That was a 1986 explosion. When it rains, water seeps into the sarcophagus of concrete, heats up, the chain reaction slowly builds up again.
Water is an excellent source of coolant. So what's the problem? There's no shortage of water, obviously, especially in the face of a tsunami.
Think of driving a car. The car is out of control. What do? You hit the brakes. But the brakes don't work. Then the radiator starts to overheat and the radiator explodes. So your brakes don't work, the radiator explodes, and then your gas tank is about to catch on fire. What do? You head for the river. The river will cool down the car, cool down the radiator, and make sure that you don't explode. Well, that's what's happening at the reactor site. First, the emergency core cooling system didn't work because the tsunami knocked it out. No brakes. Then a hydrogen gas bubble blew up the containment structure, blowing up your radiator. And then what they do? They pumped seawater into the reactor site.
Next best thing available.
Right, like driving it into the river. But the problem is that it is away from the oceans. You have to pump it in. There's no electricity. The pumps don't work. The generators don't work. And the crew there is being reduced from 800 people down to 50. You're talking about essentially a suicide squad that know that they could get a lethal dose. So there's not enough manpower to make sure that seawater is covering everything, even as the seawater boils off. But I tell you, at a certain point, even they will leave. And at that point, we'll have to abandon ship. And when you abandon ship, you're going to have 3 meltdowns right in a row. That's the nightmare scenario. And the spent fuel pond, which is adjacent to the 3 reactors, is open to the sky. There's no cover. There's no vessel. It's just an open swimming pool of hot rods containing more waste than in the core of a nuclear power plant. Hollywood likes to focus in on the core, the meltdown. But it is the lowly waste dump that could actually cause the most damage. And that's what is now separating President Obama from the Japanese Prime Minister. President Obama's people are saying, hey, you got no water on that spent fuel pond. It could explode. It's dangerous. And the Japanese government is saying, no, things are stable. Well, I think the meltdown that we are seeing is the meltdown of the credibility of the Japanese government.